The legend of Napoleon Bonaparte is often framed by his physical size, a caricature of a small man with an oversized ego. In truth, his height was average for his era, but the perception of smallness has clung to his name, a stark and ironic contrast to the colossal scale of his life's work. He was a man whose physical presence was utterly dwarfed by the immensity of his spirit. His dreams were not merely large, they were boundless, stretching far beyond the borders of France, reaching into the very fabric of the future. He envisioned a world remade in his image, a new order built on principles of logic, merit, and power. This was not the ambition of a common monarch, content with a temporary throne and the privileges of birth. He sought something far more enduring, a permanent, indelible mark on the pages of history. He saw himself not as a king, but as a force of nature, an architect of destiny, chosen by circumstance and his own formidable will to impose order on the chaos of his time. This was a relentless, insatiable hunger, a primal need to be the greatest, to surpass the legends of the past, and to be remembered for all time. For him, there was no final destination, only a perpetual state of becoming. Every victory was merely the prelude to the next campaign. Every title he acquired was just a stepping stone on an endless ascent, from general to first consul, from consul to emperor of the French. Each step was a calculated consolidation of power, a new platform from which to launch even grander designs. His drive was a seismic event that reshaped a continent. Ancient laws were swept away, replaced by a unified civil code. Centuries-old empires were challenged, their armies shattered, their borders redrawn. The fire within him was a dual-edged sword. It warmed him with the incandescent glow of glory, but it also threatened to consume him and all of Europe in its flames. He sought fame and fortune, not just for himself, but for his entire family, elevating his siblings to the thrones of Europe. This dynastic ambition was inextricably bound to his vision for a modern, unified continent under French leadership. He climbed a ladder that seemed to have no final rung. With each step he took, a higher one, previously unseen, would reveal itself. The summit was a mirage, always receding. His ambition was both profoundly creative and terrifyingly destructive. He gave France new institutions, but bled it of its sons. He brought order and law, but also relentless war. He amassed power, fame, an empire, and yet it was never enough. His gaze was fixed always on the horizon, on the next, more glorious prize that shimmered just out of reach. To understand this hunger, we must look beyond the gilded palaces of Paris. Napoleon's story begins not in the heart of France, but on the rugged, fiercely independent island of Corsica. Born Napoleone di Buonaparte in 1769 to a family of minor nobility, he was an outsider. Sent to military school in France, he was a scholarship boy with a thick accent, mocked for his foreignness. It was in this isolation that his character was forged, in the cold logic of mathematics, the grand sweep of history, and the epic tales of Alexander and Caesar. He was not just studying their campaigns, he was searching for a blueprint. He arrived at the military academy at Brienne a boy of 9, a provincial outsider from Corsica. His French was thick with an accent, his name, Buonaparte, sounded foreign, and his modest background stood in stark contrast to the sons of French aristocracy who surrounded him. Mocked for being different, he found solace not in friendship, but in books and an unyielding, almost ferocious ambition. This isolation forged an iron will, a deep-seated belief that he would have to carve his own destiny, relying on nothing but his own intellect and resolve. While his peers practiced courtly manners, he devoured the works of the great thinkers and mastered the precise, unforgiving languages of mathematics and geometry. This wasn't just academic exercise, it was the key to understanding the most decisive weapon of the age, artillery. He saw it not as a blunt instrument, but as a surgical tool, capable of breaking enemy lines and shattering morale before the first infantryman charged. He studied ballistics, logistics, and topography, mastering the science of war while others were still learning its traditions. In the quiet of the library, he walked with giants, He dissected the campaigns of Alexander and Caesar, learning not just their tactics, but how they commanded loyalty, projected power, and built legacies that echoed through millennia. He understood that history was a practical manual for greatness, a blueprint for how legends are made, and crucially, how they are remembered. Then, the French Revolution erupted, a political earthquake that shattered the foundations of the old world. For the established order, it was chaos and terror. But for a young, ambitious officer without a title, it was the ultimate opportunity. As aristocratic officers fled or faced the guillotine, a power vacuum emerged. Suddenly, the old rules of birthright and privilege were swept away. A new currency emerged, merit, and in a nation at war with all of Europe, military merit was the most valuable coin in the realm. Napoleon saw his chance. He looked at the chaos-consuming France and saw not just a nation to serve, but a destiny to seize. His ambition was no longer just to rise within the system, it was to master it. While other generals clung to the rigid, predictable tactics of the 18th century, Napoleon's mind moved at a different speed. He embraced speed, surprise, and concentration of force, using his artillery to punch holes in the enemy line and create decisive breakthroughs. He conducted battles like a symphony of violence and precision. In Italy in 1796, the 26-year-old general was given command of a starving, demoralized army. He found them in rags, without pay, and on the verge of mutiny. He didn't just promise them supplies, he promised them honor, glory, and the riches of the most fertile plains on earth. He spoke to them as a fellow soldier and they believed him. What followed was a whirlwind campaign that stunned Europe. With lightning maneuvers, he defeated armies far larger than his own. At the Battle of Lodi, he personally led a charge across a heavily defended bridge, cementing his legend as a fearless leader. At Rivoli, he executed a tactical masterpiece, securing northern Italy and forcing Austria to the peace table. But his genius wasn't confined to the battlefield. He was a master of propaganda. His dispatches from the front, carefully crafted and printed in Parisian newspapers, transformed his victories into epic sagas. He became a national hero, the savior who could bring order from chaos. His next move was even bolder: an expedition to Egypt. The strategic goal was to threaten British interests in India, but the campaign was a military failure, his fleet destroyed by Nelson at the Battle of the Nile. Yet, through sheer narrative control, he framed the expedition as a triumph of French civilization, highlighting the scientific discoveries made by the scholars he brought with him. He abandoned his army and returned to France, not in disgrace, Quergenderdine, resplendresturi, but as a conquering hero. He found the government weak and corrupt. On the 18th of Brumaire, he used his immense popularity and the threat of military force to stage a coup d'état. At just 30 years old, Napoleon Bonaparte became first consul of France, effectively its ruler. His military fame had been flawlessly translated into absolute political power. For any other man, this would have been the pinnacle of a lifetime's ambition. For Napoleon, it was only a base camp for the conquest of Europe. As first consul, Napoleon moved with astonishing speed to rebuild a fractured France. He centralized the state, appointing powerful prefects to enforce his will in every department. To stabilize the shattered economy, he established the Bank of France, a cornerstone of financial order that endures to this day. He healed the deep wounds of the revolution by signing the Concordat with the Pope, reconciling church and state. He created the Legion of Honor, a new meritocracy rewarding talent and service, not birthright. But his most enduring legacy was the Code Napoleon. This monumental civil code enshrined legal equality, property rights, and religious tolerance. It swept away the confusing feudal laws of the old regime, creating a unified legal framework that would be adopted and admired across the globe. He had delivered order and stability, but for a man of his ambition, it was not enough. On December 2, 1804, inside a freezing Notre Dame Cathedral, Napoleon orchestrated the ultimate act of political theater. With Pope Pius VII looking on, he did not wait to be crowned. Instead, he took the crown, a laurel wreath of golden leaves, evoking the Caesars of Rome, and placed it upon his own head. The message was unmistakable. His power came not from God or ancient lineage, but from his own achievements and the will of the French people. He was now Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. It was a spectacular ascent, but it carried a heavier burden. To the ancient monarchies of Europe, this was an intolerable provocation. A self-made emperor, a product of revolution, now sat among them. They saw a dangerous upstart, and his title was a direct challenge to their entire world order. The Third Coalition was formed to destroy him. In the autumn of 1805, Napoleon responded with a campaign of breathtaking speed and precision. He marched his Grande Armée from the English Channel to the Danube, encircling and capturing an entire Austrian army at Ulm with minimal fighting. He then advanced into Moravia, facing a combined Russo-Austrian force. At Austerlitz, he masterfully feigned weakness, deliberately abandoning the strategic Pratzen heights. He lured the Allies into a trap. As the morning fog lifted, the famous sun of Austerlitz broke through, revealing the Allied columns descending into the valley. Napoleon then struck their overextended center, shattering their lines. It was a devastating victory, his tactical masterpiece, defeating 2 emperors in a single day. In the aftermath, he remade the map of Europe. He dissolved the 1,000-year-old Holy Roman Empire, forged new states in the Confederation of the Rhine, and bound defeated rulers to his imperial system. From Spain to Poland, Napoleon seemed invincible, the master of the continent. Yet this absolute dominance bred a dangerous arrogance. The view from the pinnacle of power was magnificent, but it was also blinding. Convinced of his own infallibility, he would soon make the decisions that ensured the higher he climbed, the more catastrophic the fall would be. In 1812, over 500,000 marched into Russia, seeking another Austerlitz. The Russians refused a decisive battle, retreating, burning, and vanishing. Winter, hunger, and relentless attacks shattered the Grande Armée. All Europe rose. Leipzig broke his power. Paris fell. He abdicated. Exiled, escaped, and gambled again, until Waterloo ended it for good. On St. Helena, stripped of power, empire, and family, only memory remained. He crafted his legend, reflecting on triumphs and catastrophes. Why never satisfied? Because his desire was not finite, it was glory. Power did not bring peace, it created new rivals, new rebellions, new wars, energy, brilliance, belief, then arrogance, impatience, and fatal risk. He could not stop climbing, even at the top of the world. Ambition builds, and when endless, destroys.